You've probably heard Bryan Johnson say this.
I am the healthiest person on planet Earth. Yeah, I have the best comprehensive biomarkers of anybody. Not just that's 47-year-olds.
Bro, you earned it.
Anybody in the world.
I have the best biomarkers of anybody on the planet. So if there were an Olympic sport for health, I would be the gold medalist.
Every time he says it, I'm like, yeah, that's not true. There are hundreds of people out there who have better biomarkers than Bryan Johnson. I analyzed Bryan's most recent test results and compared them to my own. 44 of them I have better results, 9 of them Bryan has better results, and 12 of them were equal. I think that's a very one-sided victory. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all of the biomarkers and talk about them. Because number 1, you will learn a lot about analyzing your own biomarkers. Number 2, you'll know what's optimal for over 65 biomarkers. Number 3, you'll generally know how to improve those biomarkers. And number 4 is just good content. As a disclaimer, I'm not saying that I'm the healthiest person in the world, but I have factually better biomarkers than Bryan Johnson. Here's a quick summary of the differences between our biomarkers. Bryan has good metabolic health, but I have slightly better. Bryan has suboptimal kidney function. Mine is excellent. We have semi-equal liver values and the same liver fat percentage, but I have significantly lower visceral fat. We also have semi-equal lipids, but mine are natural without medication. Bryan's fitness, like strength and VO2 max, are good for his age, but not elite by any means. Mine is significantly better and in the elite category. We both have normal hormone levels, but I have slightly better. Bryan's PhenoAge, which is biological age based on blood markers, is 8.81 years lower than his chronological age, but mine is 18.5 years lower. That's a 10+ year gap. Now, I know what you're thinking, Siim is 31, Bryan is 47, of course he has better biomarkers. Well, that's exactly the point. Bryan says he has the best biomarkers of anyone in the world, no matter their age.
Not just that's 47-year-olds.
Bro, you earned it.
Anybody in the world.
I think it's obvious that the healthiest person in the world will always be someone who's like 16, 18 or 20 years old, with all things being equal. Of course, some 47-year-olds are healthier than some 18-year-olds, but there are tens of thousands of 18-year-olds that have better biomarkers than Bryan Johnson. Now that this is out of the way, let's get started. So this all started a few weeks ago, or a few months ago even, when Bryan Johnson says, I have the best biomarkers in the world, I'm the healthiest person in the world, and if anyone has better biomarkers, then they should post it. So here I am, and let's get started with the fitness markers, so things related to physical fitness. VO2 max, so Bryan Johnson's VO2 max is 54.2, which is good for his age. It's not elite even for 18-year-olds, or VO2 max peaks when you're 18 years old. That's naturally when your VO2 max should be the highest, and that's not really an elite level for 18-year-olds. Now, it's good for 47-year-olds, but it's not elite for 47-year-olds either. I know actually some people in their early 40s who don't do any cardio and their VO2 max is 51 or 52 or something like that. So 54 isn't that big of a flex. 54 VO2 max, it's good. It's what you would want to get. At least over 50 is a good optimal range for VO2 max, but it's definitely not in the elite category. And there's a few reasons why Bryan's VO2 max is a little bit lower. I'll talk about it later, but the short story or long story short, it's because of lower iron status and some of this pseudo anemia that he might have. I'll share about that a bit later. So, hemoglobin and blood oxygenation status, that plays a huge role in VO2 max, which essentially describes maximal oxygen consumption. So yeah, my VO2 max is 66. Now the test was done 1.5 years ago when I got the result of 66, but right now it's probably still around like low 60s. My last test was low 60s, so it's still significantly higher than Bryan Johnson. And 60, a VO2 max of 60 can be considered elite category for 18-year-olds. Grip strength, so this is just a dynamometer where you squeeze it, and grip strength is a good general biomarker for overall health and overall muscle mass and muscle strength, especially for upper body strength. Now the thing is that it's not going to be, okay, I'm just going to train my grip and I'm going to live longer. It's more about, just having good grip means that you're generally healthier and you have a better diet and you just have slightly more muscle mass. His result, 132 pounds in his graph that he shared, I'm not sure if it reflects the sum total of both arms. Usually you do this test where you measure both arms and then you sum it up and then you get a result. I don't know if it was one arm or both arms. if this was both arms together, 132 pounds, then it would be pretty low. But I think it's just one arm. He's a best arm, maybe right arm or left arm, I'm not sure. So yeah, we'll just presume it's just one arm. My grip strength from the dynamometer highest is 150 pounds. That's around 68 kilograms. And my combined arms is 298 pounds or 67, 68 kilograms for both arms. Bench press, Bryan's bench press 240 pounds, which is around 110 kilograms. It's not, let's say, elite category again. Someone who is 18-year-old, if they bench 240 pounds, then that's impressive for an 18-year-old. But the problem here is that muscle strength doesn't peak when you're 18 years old. Someone who is in the 30s and 40s will always be muscularly stronger than an 18-year-old. That because of muscle maturity and just the age. In men, muscle mass peaks mid-30s, early 40s. So comparing your bench press to an 18-year-old is not impressive because 18-year-olds don't have high bench or high squat or something like that. But let's say for a 47-year-old, a bench of 240, 110 kilos, it's well above average. It's much higher than an average person, but it's not some powerlifting level strength. Of course, that's not his goal, but yeah. Still, my best result, 300 pounds, so that's 135 kilograms, and that's considered not elite either, so it's not something that would be super impressive. It's significantly well above average. It's I guess you could call it in the more advanced tier, lower level of advanced tier, but it's not elite category for, let's say, advanced strength trainees. Leg press, so this test, now this refers to this kind of a quarter depth leg press. That is it's a medical test where you do the leg press, but you don't go all the way to the depth. You just do like some of, even before the knees are parallel. So it's kind of a quarter leg press. And Bryan's result for that is 850 pounds, which is something like 380 kilograms or something. Now, these numbers are big, 850 pounds. For the average person, it sounds a lot. But if you've ever gone to the gym, then, you can bench press or you can leg press 200 kilograms even in your first week at the gym. So a leg press of 850 isn't super significant. And the leg press isn't the best. I guess it's, useful test for just measuring leg press or leg strength in isolation. But most gym goers actually don't consider the leg press to be some gold standard strength metric. But that's what he used, 850 pounds. If I were to guesstimate, then 850 pound leg press, quarter leg press would be the equivalent of maybe 115 kilogram squat. So that's, again, above average, especially for a 47-year-old. It's not useful to compare it to an 18-year-old, but for an average 30-year-old male who's let's say decently fit, they can squat 120 kilos maybe. So this is kind of an average result for a general fitness enthusiast in their 30s. My leg press result for this would be over 1,000 pounds, and I've done parallel squats, but with a barbell, 160 kilograms. So my leg strength is significantly higher. My squat is actually one of my best lifts. My all-time best squat, it wasn't below parallel, but it was, let's say, almost the parallel, was 180 kilograms. I did that a few years ago, but right now I can do 160 kilograms with a parallel squat. Lung strength, so this is measuring with this device that you just exhale as hard as possible. It just measures your lung strength. And by the way, if you want to see the receipts, the actual test results, then you can just head over to my Twitter. I'll put the link in the description. I have all the test results as well down there. So you don't have to take my word for any of this. Body composition markers. So these are just muscle mass and fat mass. So visceral fat. Bryan's visceral fat mass, which is the fat around the organs, is around 0.56 liters, whereas mine is 0.25 liters. And the interesting thing about that is this was after I was bulking, so I was actually 2 kilograms heavier than I am right now and what I'm normally. So plausibly my visceral fat right now, as I've lost some of that extra weight after the mini bulk, could be even lower. So my visceral fat on a DEXA scan was 54 grams, and on the MRI it could be something like, let's say, 100 grams, 150 grams. 100, let's say 100 milliliters. So that's, twice, 2 to 3 times lower than Bryan Johnson's, which is, quite interesting. So a visceral fat of 0.56 liters isn't like a bad result. It's what you would consider within the normal range. And if it were to be higher than that, then it could be considered more concerning. So a visceral fat of over 600 liters would be something, you need to lose it. 0.56 liters is acceptable still, but optimally you would want to have it closer to 300 milliliters rather than 560 milliliters. Liver fat also MRI, both of ours is 1.5%. So that's low, and that's a good result. Muscle mass. So I haven't done an MRI for muscle mass, or the MRI that I didn't measure muscle mass specifically. But Bryan Johnson's muscle mass based on MRI is 18.1 liters. But I'm around 5 to 6, even up to 8 kilograms heavier than Bryan Johnson, and I have similar body fat percentage, so I could say that, I probably have more muscle mass than Bryan Johnson as well, based on just the visible output and based on the visceral fat and the other body composition markers. So I can say that, I have better muscle mass as well. Now, of course, I am younger, so muscle mass in males peaks around mid-30s, so I'm not at the peak yet. I'm 31 right now, so I'm not even at the peak of what naturally is considered the peak of muscle mass in males, but still. So just this comparing it again to 18-year-olds is kind of not accurate, because muscle mass doesn't peak in 18-year-olds. A 30-year-old male has more muscle than an 18-year-old athlete almost, unless that's a strength athlete. So that's it. Next, we have bone density. So this is kind of interesting. Both of our bone density is quite high, and there's 2 ways to go about it. So one, you can just look at the total bone density, bone mass. And here I have slightly higher bone mass. So I have 1.541 grams per square centimeters, whereas Bryan is 1.4770 grams per square centimeters. So I have total amount of more bone mass. But if you were to look at it relative to age, which is used with this T and Z score, then he has a bit higher, 2.9 versus mine 1.3. So that's standard deviations above normal. So Bryan's bone density is 2.9 standard deviations higher than what is normal for his age. So what is normal for a 47-year-old. So that's a very high bone density for his age. And mine is a 1.3 standard deviations higher than what's normal for a 30-year-old or 31-year-old. Or I was 30 when I did that test, the bone density test. So it just means, that both of our bone densities, several standard deviations higher than normal, but I have, relatively speaking, or not relatively, but objectively speaking, higher bone density. He has, relatively speaking, a higher bone density for his age, if we were to look at just the age difference. Now, if your bone density is lower, let's say your bone density is below 0 standard deviations, what's normal, so that's considered osteopenia and osteoporosis. The lower it goes, the higher the risk of fractures, and the lower the bone density is. So if your bone density is less than 0, then that's a concern. You would want to address that with, in most cases, it has to just involve dietary intervention and resistance training exercise. So the reason both of us have high bone density is because of increased resistance training. All right, moving on with inflammation and immune markers, starting with homocysteine. Bryan's is 7 micromoles per liter, so that's a good result, but it could be slightly lower. It's something that you would want to be concerned about. and optimal homocysteine is pretty much 5 micromoles per liter. And it's very rare that it will be 5, but if it's above 10, then that can be considered something to be more deliberate about. Usually it's going to involve taking B vitamin complex supplementation. People who have poor methylation will have higher homocysteine, so higher homocysteine can predict heart disease, or can be a causal factor for heart disease. It damages the blood vessels, etc. So you don't want to have high homocysteine. You don't want to have homocysteine above 10 and especially above 15 micromoles per liter. Both of our results are kind of optimal. Mine is slightly lower. And I did actually some specific things to lower my homocysteine from even 9 to 5.9. And it involved trimethylglycine supplementation, 2 grams a day, and also hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which Bryan does as well quite a lot. I think he has made many posts about that he takes hyperbaric oxygen therapy pretty regularly. So those things can actually lower homocysteine levels. hsCRP, so inflammation, both of ours are very low, 0.3 versus 0.1. Now, it might be that the test that he used just capped out at 0.3, so his CRP might also be 0.1, we don't know. And, mine could also be lower than 0.1 because the test capped out at 0.1. I've also got 0.01 on one of the tests for my CRP, so it just depends a lot on what kind of lab you use. So, but regardless, both of our CRP levels are close to 0 or virtually 0. And the optimal CRP level for health and longevity is as close to 0 as possible. Pretty much less than 0.1 is what you want to get with CRP. And the higher the CRP, especially if it's above 1 milligram per liter, then that's something to try to intervene with. And usually it involves improving metabolic health, improving sleep, losing weight in a lot of cases, and supporting the body's antioxidant defense with some supplements or hyperbaric oxygen therapy or exercise or something like that. TNF, that's another inflammatory marker. Both of ours is low, close to 0, 0.8. Glutathione, so this is considered the body's master antioxidant, and both of our results are in the 200s. Mine is slightly higher, 240 versus 219. And this is something that I think doesn't matter that much because it can probably fluctuate a lot. If you got some infection recently, it can be lower. If you take glutathione precursors like glycine NAC in large doses, if you take intravenous glutathione, you can in short term increase your glutathione status quite a lot. So this is kind of those markers then can fluctuate a lot and wouldn't be something to really worry about. Uric acid, so kidney marker and inflammation marker. Bryan 4.2, mine 5.14. Now, this is a marker that some people have different opinions about. Some people think that it should be as low as possible. Other people think that it should be somewhere in the moderate, around 5. I personally think that, too low uric acid can be a problem. And as we talk about Bryan's kidney markers a bit later, then it makes sense why it's a bit lower. So I would, personally, I would say that 5.14 is better than 4.2. But some people might have different opinions. But regardless, in the context of Bryan's kidney markers, as we'll show, it isn't like the more optimal range. White blood cells. So Bryan's white blood cells 3.1, which is below the reference range. So these are immune cells, and mine was a 4.8, which is optimal. So it's a healthy immune system. Now, it might be low because of some recent infection. You recently were sick. Let's say a few weeks ago even, you had minor cold, some cough or whatever it is, that can just reduce the white blood cells and it can stay low for a few weeks. So again, it's not an indication of some systemic health. It's just a short-term marker that fluctuates quite a lot. The same with lymphocyte percentage. 38% is below the reference range and it's quite low. Mine is 49.6%, so a much better result. All right, metabolic health markers, hemoglobin A1C, average blood sugar levels. Bryan's is 5.1%, mine is 4.9%. And, they're pretty equal, but the 4.9 is still better than 5.1. And interestingly, Bryan is taking metformin and a few other supplements that lower blood sugar. I'm not. So, it's just indication of better metabolic health from my part. Triglycerides. both are in the optimal range, although mine is significantly better, actually 39 milligrams per deciliter compared to 55. So triglycerides as well, if they're lower, that's better. If your triglycerides are above 150, even like over 100, then that can be an indication of more poor metabolic health and even some aspects of insulin resistance. Obviously, Bryan's isn't that. He's 55, which is good, but below 50 is even better than above 50. And triglycerides usually can rise because of increased carbohydrate intake, or also increased fat intake, or just poor clearance of these, nutrients from the bloodstream. And Bryan isn't eating some high carb diet. He's eating actually quite low carb, lowish carb. I'm eating a lot of carbs. I'm eating 200, 300 grams of carbs. So my triglycerides are significantly lower despite me eating that many carbohydrates, which just illustrates my very good metabolic health. Insulin, both are optimal. Insulin optimally should be like 2, 3, 4, less than 5. And the lower is not always that the lower the better. If you have 0 insulin, then that's probably also not healthy. If it's very high, if it's above 15, then that can be indication of insulin resistance or some diabetes. But yeah, both of our insulin levels are very good. Mine is slightly better. Blood glucose, so this is a CGM based continuous glucose monitor, and just looking at the fluctuations of all the blood sugar across the entire day, 24/7. So my average was 81 milligrams per deciliter when I did the test while eating 300 grams of carbohydrates per day, and Bryan's was 91 milligrams per deciliter. And the reason why I'm able to eat that many carbohydrates and maintain insulin sensitivity is because of my increased fitness, increased muscle mass, physical activity, all those things. Although I'm exercising less than Bryan Johnson, I exercise at least maybe a few hours less per week than Bryan Johnson. So I just, maybe it's my younger age, whatever it is. But I also think that insulin is a muscle that if you don't train, you lose it, similar to other functions in the body. So if you're on a low carb, 0 carb diet, then you will create this pseudo insulin resistance state where your body isn't, just loses the muscle to, let's say, produce insulin slightly. Now, it's not pathological insulin resistance because it's more self-induced, or it's a pseudo-insulin resistance. It's whenever you were to be eating carbohydrates, then you would have a harder time to clear the bloodstream from the glucose. So if you never use insulin, then your body loses the ability to use it, essentially. And by introducing more carbohydrates to my diet, my blood sugar actually lowers because of increased insulin sensitivity. So a lot of, let's say, carnivore dieters out there as well, they have pretty bad blood sugar levels despite eating 0 carbohydrates, right? So some carnivore influencers, you can see their blood work, they have pre-diabetic blood sugar levels, which is not, a good sign given the fact that they're eating 0 carbohydrates. Now, maybe it's not a big concern, we don't know, but it's just illustrates the point that if you never use insulin, you never eat carbohydrates, then you lose the insulin sensitivity slightly. Fasting glucose, Bryan's 97 milligrams, mine 80 milligrams. 97 is a bit high. If it's over 100, then that's more worrisome. 115 is pre-diabetes. 125 is considered diabetes. Now, the 97 might be because of, I don't know, he had some bad sleep or he was stressed out or something like that. So the fasting glucose can fluctuate a lot, obviously. But, given his, let's say, body composition of being leaner, eating a low-calorie diet, eating not many carbohydrates, then 97 is a bit high, especially if he's taking metformin as well. Cardiovascular markers, so heart disease markers, ApoB, 70 milligrams for Bryan, mine 58, and I'm not taking any lipid-lowering medications or anything like that. My ApoB is low just through diet changes. So I eat a lot of fiber. I probably eat like 40, 50 grams of fiber a day, and the fiber helps with lipids, ApoB, and cholesterol. And I'm also eating less saturated fat. I'm eating more, let's say, the only fats I eat is olive oil, fish, walnuts usually, and from meat, eggs as well. But I eat a lot of fiber that helps to bind to the lipids and lower them. And also triglycerides. The increased fiber can help with blood sugar and helps with lowering triglycerides as well. So ApoB, what's optimal? 70 is already pretty optimal, but 58 is better. Like if your ApoB is 40, 50, 60, then your risk of atherosclerotic plaque accumulation is quite low. If your ApoB is over 120, then the risk of that is slightly higher. But 58 is much better than 70 in this scenario. ApoA1, so that's another apolipoprotein. Both of our results are quite optimal. Now he has a few different results, 133, 143 range. Mine is 140 in my last test result. So I would say that they're kind of equal in that regard. LDL as well, Bryan has a few different results. His lowest has been 47. His last was 68. Mine last one was 58. So that's also, both are, I would say, equal. But he is taking some sort of lipid-lowering drug, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure exactly which one, or if it's 100% true, but I think I've seen some posts or heard that he's taking some lipid-lowering drug, whereas I'm not taking anything. Total cholesterol, both are quite optimal, both are quite equal, 125 to 130. HDL cholesterol, Bryan is 51, I'm 62, and so HDL cholesterol is a better marker of insulin sensitivity than it is of cardiovascular disease risk. So a low HDL is usually a sign of insulin resistance and diabetes. So it's not that the higher the better. Actually, excessively high HDL is associated with increased heart disease risk as well. So an HDL of 50 and 62, they're both optimal in that sense. 62 tends to be a bit better, and it probably is because of my improved insulin sensitivity. Lp(a), so this is a genetically influenced heart disease marker, lipoprotein, and obviously there's a genetics involved here, so I have lower result. Now these are different units. Bryan's is 23.8 nanomoles per liter, mine is 3.1 milligrams per deciliter. But if you were to convert this 3.1 milligram to nanomoles, then it would be something like 7 or 8 nanomoles. So even if you were to do the conversion, it would be, mine result would be lower. So it doesn't matter which conversion you use. So 23 is not bad. There are some people who have 100, 150, 300 even. So those individuals are at a significantly higher risk of heart disease due to genetics. A result of 23.8 isn't, very bad, but my result of, let's say, 7 nanomoles, if you were to do the conversion, is significantly better. Now, there's genetics involved here. So, you can't, you can't point at any specific lifestyle or a dietary intervention here. Oxidized LDL, so 31 nanograms per milliliter for Bryan. And for me, my result was below the reference range, which means that I have almost non-detectable oxidized LDL, which is very good. That it means I have zero inflammation and zero oxidation of cholesterol in my body. And a result of 31 isn't, it's is not catastrophic or alarming, but it's higher than you would expect from someone who is following a very pristine lifestyle. BMP, so this is a cardiovascular marker. It reflects heart health, especially heart stress. I haven't measured this specific marker myself. I've tried to measure it. I looked at different labs, even in Estonia, in India. None of the labs actually got the specific test of BMP, but I got measured what's called NT-proBNP, which is not the same marker, but it's kind of like a pseudo-similar marker. And you can't convert it, so you can't convert my result to the BMP of Bryan's. So if you were to do some sort of a conversion, you can use like ChatGPT to, okay, if you were to do the conversion, although it's not possible, what would it be like? So that would give you like a result of around 3 to 12 picograms per milliliter for me and 18 for Bryan. So I would say, I think we're equal in that sense. And it's unlikely that I have some sort of cardiac stress, given that I have much better heart markers than Bryan. So, case in point, resting heart rate. Bryan's best result is 39 that he's had over the last few weeks. I've seen his average is 48. Mine best is 35. It's actually been 34 as well in the past, and on average is 39, 38, something like that. Now, of course, if your resting heart rate is 0, you're dead. So it's not that the lower the better, but there is a linear association between resting heart rate above 45 and increased risk of all-cause mortality in a meta-analysis involving over 1.2 million individuals. So a higher resting heart rate, a resting heart rate that's above normal or above average, the average person's resting heart rate is too high. The average person has poor fitness, poor cardiovascular health, and their average resting heart rate is also too high. So a lower resting heart rate is generally better marker of better heart health. And my result of 35, 39 is better result than Bryan's. And if it were to be lower than that, I think 39, 35 is kind of the lowest you want to go. If your resting heart rate is 30, then it might be too low. HRV, heart rate variability. So this measures the interval between heartbeats. Bryan's is around 50s. Mine is over 100. So yeah, it's significantly higher. Now there is some genetic differences in HRV as well. Some individuals just have their HRV capped at 60 or 70, whatever it is. But generally speaking, a higher HRV 100 is better than 50, generally speaking. Blood pressure, both our blood pressure is quite optimal. Slightly lower than average is better, so less than 120/80 is slightly better. But you also have to obviously look at all the other markers. If you have very low blood pressure, you're malnourished, you have poor grip strength, low bone density, low VO2 max, then this low blood pressure can be a sign of just frailty and increased risk of death because of that. But in the context of good fitness and good cardiovascular health, a blood pressure of 110 is a better result than 120 in most cases. Now, blood pressure also fluctuates. On some nights or some days it can be 120, others 125, others 105, 110. So just don't take each individual marker at face value. And how do you lower blood pressure? Just, general fitness, general improved heart health I like saunas. I take a lot of saunas. I've been taking saunas since I was, 2 years old. So I've taken a sauna for, 30 years of my life almost. And I think Bryan has started to do some saunas over the last few weeks or months only. So yeah, maybe his heart metrics will improve. Maybe his HRV will also increase. I do think that the sauna has a pretty big effect on HRV, especially if you combine it with cold therapy. You do like hot and cold back and forth. That's just, feels amazing and helps with HRV and resting heart rate as well. Omega-3 index. So this reflects the omega-3 fats in your red blood cells, and an omega-3 index of over 6.5% is kind of a threshold for a lower mortality risk compared to a lower score. And you want to get it at least like 8% is a little more like a sweet spot. Bryan's is 9.9, mine is 9%, so he has a slightly better result. And the way you increase this percentage is through omega-3 supplementation, eating more omega-3 foods, so there is some argument to me that omega-6 fatty acids from nuts and seeds or something like that can also, let's say, downgrade your omega-3 index, but I haven't seen like very clear proof of that. It's more about, just how much omega-3s are you eating. That's the biggest factor. RDW, red cell distribution width, both are optimal. His recent result was 12.1%, average 11.5%, mine 11.9%. So I would say, we're pretty equal in that scenario. MCV, that's a mean corpuscular volume. Bryan's result is 101, mine is 91, and mine is better. Over 100 is too high. If it's over 98 even, then that can be considered a bit too high. Mine is actually in the like a sweet spot. Hemoglobin, so this is just reflects blood oxygenation status and iron status. So Bryan's is a bit low, 13.6 grams per deciliter, and mine is 14.7 grams per deciliter. So I mentioned earlier that this is one of the limiting factors to his VO2 max, which is my theory that, he has lower iron status, lower hemoglobin status because of his plant-based diet, and apparently he's not supplementing iron either. So his hemoglobin is a bit low, and that limits his VO2 max. So he just can't push himself as hard due to the low oxygenation status. So that's actually below the reference range. So something like 14.5 would be quite good, minus 14.7. But if you were to really try to maximize VO2 max, you would want to get your hemoglobin to something like 15.5 even. Platelets, so this reflects blood clotting, and Bryan's result of 165 is a bit too low. So you don't want to have 0 platelets because it means that your blood isn't clotting. That increases risk of bleeding. So you want to have healthy amount of platelets. Of course, if your platelets are too high, if they're above 350, then that can be a concern for blood clots, thrombosis, things like that. But a result of 165 is a bit too low. So a sweet spot would be like 200 to 250, 200 to 300. It's kind of a sweet spot. MCH, so this is a mean corpuscular hemoglobin, and Bryan's is 32.8 picograms minus 29.4. I guess, I would consider them equal. Creatinine, so this is a kidney marker, and this is quite interesting. Bryan's creatinine levels are 1.21 milligrams per deciliter, which is above the reference range. Mine is 0.8 milligrams per deciliter. And, the optimal range for creatinine is something like 0.6 to 0.9, maybe 1 at the most. But if it's above 1, then I would consider that suboptimal. Now, it's interesting because usually what raises creatinine status or creatinine levels are muscle mass, physical exercise, because it reflects protein breakdown, right? If you break down a lot of protein due to higher muscle mass or exercise, you will have higher creatinine in the blood, or eating also higher protein, especially animal protein, that tends to influence creatinine levels. But for Bryan, he's not eating animal protein. He's has less muscle mass than me, so he has 5-6 kilograms less muscle mass of lean tissue than me. And the only thing that could explain his increased creatinine level would be his exercise, which he does a bit more than me, but it's not like I don't exercise at all. I exercise almost every day. I exercise shorter than him, and in total I exercise maybe 2 hours less per week than him. So it's quite interesting, and I have more muscle mass, I eat more protein, I eat more animal protein, and I have significantly lower creatinine levels. Now he is taking creatine, I think he's taking like 10 grams of creatine, but it shouldn't raise his creatinine levels that high. The creatine supplementation. I've taken also creatine in the past. I took 20 grams. You can check out my video. I took 20 grams of creatine, and my creatinine levels were only like 0.94, 0.95 or something like that. So even at that case, my creatinine levels never went that high. So I don't think he has kidney disease, but his creatinine levels are surprisingly high. Despite not eating any animal protein, despite having less muscle mass, he doesn't have a ton of muscle mass, right? He's low body fat and he's muscular, but he doesn't have mass, if that makes sense. So the only thing is the very high amount of exercise that he does, which I think is unnecessarily high amounts of exercise in the context of creatinine levels. Cystatin C, this is a better kidney marker, and his is 0.87 milligrams per deciliter, mine is 0.67. He's a bit high. Now, it's not kidney disease high, right? But optimally, it should be less than 75 or less than 7, even better. And mine is much better. Now, EGFR, so EGFR, glomerular filtration rate, so it's an umbrella kidney health marker. And his, based on the creatinine calculation, was 74. And if you were to do the estimation of EGFR from cystatin C, his result would be 99. So less than 100 would indicate suboptimal kidney function. Less than 90 is first stage of kidney disease. Now, based on creatinine status, he has kidney disease. But again, I don't think he has actual kidney disease. It's because of the increased creatinine due to excessive exercise. So let's say his creatinine is 99. If we were to calculate it from cystatin C, it's still much lower than my 112 calculated from cystatin C. So mine 112 is peak kidney health in that sense. Albumin, so this is most abundant protein in the blood, usually reflects nutrition status. 4.5 for Bryan, mine 4.6. Now I have slightly higher. It's not a huge difference. But yeah, if it were to be lower than that, so let's say 4.3, then he would probably just need to increase his calorie intake. So we both have slightly lower albumin compared to, let's say, someone who were to be eating a ton of calories because of, we obviously don't eat insane amounts of calories to maintain lower body fat percentage. Now, 4.6 is, I think, like a sweet spot. 4.6 to 4.8 is a sweet spot. 4.5 is something, I think, just reflects nutrition intake. Total protein, so these are other proteins in the blood. Total protein, Bryan's is 5.9 grams per deciliter. That's a bit low. Mine 6.73 grams per deciliter. Globulin, another protein marker, Bryan's is 1.4. Mine is 2.31. So again, his globulin is a bit too low. BUN, blood urea nitrogen, another kidney marker, both are optimal. Mine is slightly lower. Vitamin B12, and this is in the kidney category because usually B12 levels, I put it here because Bryan's B12 levels are above the reference range. They're actually quite high. It's twice as high as mine. And higher B12 isn't always a good sign because your kidneys filter things, including B vitamins, and if you have elevated B12 levels, then that could be indication that your kidneys aren't working optimally and they're not filtering out the excess. So he's taking obviously a B vitamin complex or B supplementation because he's not getting it from the plant foods. So his B12 is very high because of the supplementation, plus the kidney is not filtering it out. That's my analysis of that situation. And elevated B12 levels are actually associated with increased mortality because of the kidney component. So very high B12 levels isn't a good sign. The same with folate. So he's probably supplementing folate. He's over 20. That's also a bit too high, above the reference range. Mine is 17.4. That's in the reference range and optimal. What will be some improvements for his kidney markers? As I said, there's probably some component of exercise, excessive exercise, raising his creatinine levels. But, it's beyond the creatinine. There's also the elevated B12, elevated folate, low protein status. So I suspect there is something in his supplementation or pharmaceuticals that worsens his kidney health. Maybe lithium, maybe something else, maybe some other mystery compound he's taking currently. So yeah, these are the reasons why he has the kidney status that he has. And yeah, it could be better if his creatinine was lower and this total protein would be also higher. Perhaps if he were to increase protein intake, he would actually see an improvement in kidney markers, which has been documented to be possible. Liver markers, so yeah, GGT, 8 minus 10.7. He has a little bit better, but both are pretty optimal. GGT below 15 is optimal. Now, if your liver enzymes are also 0, then I don't think that's healthy either. And with all these other liver enzymes, lower isn't always better, although some people would like to think that. So because there is a certain amount of, let's say, physiological stress your body needs to maintain health. And if you, let's say, you have very low liver enzymes, but you have poor VO2 max, then a higher VO2 max is, based on the evidence, much better indication of long-term health than these very low liver markers. But yeah, GGT, both of ours are optimal. Bryan's 8, minus 10. AST, both are optimal for us. Mine is a little bit lower, 24 versus 23. ALT, Bryan's is a little bit lower, 21, 22. So I guess there's no real difference, significant difference. Bryan's ALP result, so that's another liver enzymes, but it's also involved in inflammation. And Bryan's is 77, mine is 51. So 77 is a bit high. 51, you could consider it the sweet spot. I don't think an ALP of below 45 is actually that good. Because again, if you have low ALP, you probably also have low strength and low VO2 max because you're not really doing anything that would raise liver enzymes. Exercise can raise ALP levels and liver enzymes. And if you were to look at the evidence, then VO2 max and grip strength are a better indication of long-term health than ALP or some other liver enzyme. So yeah, 51 I think is actually the sweet spot in my opinion. 51 to 55, below 60 at least, is a sweet spot. 45 to 60, let's say, for ALP is a sweet spot. 77 is a bit too high. Now again, it might be because of his very high amounts of exercise. So yeah, that could explain it. Because he's not drinking alcohol, his other liver enzymes are fine. So the only thing that explains it is the exercise. Bilirubin, both optimal, and yeah, nothing to really add there. Now, if people have elevated liver enzymes, the biggest reason for that is usually alcohol intake or excess sugar intake. If you improve your metabolic health, you lower your blood sugar levels with diet, exercise, weight loss, those kind of things, then you will also see improvements in liver health. But remember the visceral fat component. So there's specific things that help with visceral fat loss. So dietary polyphenols, green tea, olive oil, vegetables, berries, those kind of things. High polyphenol diet lowers visceral fat and will help with liver enzymes by doing that as well, and help with liver fat. Plus, there's the component of glycine supplementation, which I'll talk about later as well when I try to improve Bryan's results. But yeah, the component of glycine, higher amounts of glycine, help with lowering liver fat and visceral fat compared to methionine. But Bryan isn't taking glycine that much. He takes only 1 gram of glycine, which I think is a bit too low. Hormones, so testosterone, Bryan 712, Siim 767. They're both in the same ballpark. Mine is slightly higher. Free testosterone, so this is the bioactive form of testosterone. That's more important than regular testosterone. Bryan 8.8, Siim 13.8. So I have significantly higher free testosterone. And the reason for that is SHBG. So SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, is a binding protein that binds to testosterone. And if you have high SHBG, like Bryan, 56.2, then you end up with a lower free testosterone. So the optimal SHBG would be below 50, which mine is 47. And usually what raises SHBG is calorie restriction, carbohydrate restriction, iron accumulation, and liver damage. So for Bryan, he doesn't have high iron levels. He actually has low iron levels. And he doesn't have, liver damage either per se. So the high SHBG is because of the severe calorie restriction that he has and the lower carbohydrate intake. So you can, I'm also not eating a ton of calories. I'm not in massive calorie surplus. Otherwise, I wouldn't maintain leanness that much. But the key here is insulin signaling. So insulin is a pro-anabolic hormone, and insulin signals the body that there's abundance of nutrients. So by being on a low-carb diet, you see an increase in SHBG because of the carbohydrate restriction. So it's very well documented. High-protein, low-carb diets raise SHBG levels, and they lower testosterone levels in men. Whereas even low-protein, high-carb diets tend to lower SHBG levels, and they end up with higher testosterone levels as a result of that. Now, I'm not eating low-protein. I'm eating semi-high protein, but also high-carb intake. So that's why I have, in the optimal range for SHBG and increase the free testosterone levels as well. LH, FSH, both are optimal and both are in the same ballpark. DHEA, that's a precursor to testosterone. They're, in the same ballparks. Bryan's is a slightly more increased, 230 versus 214, but, I have better testosterone. So DHEA only matters to the extent of testosterone. DHEA alone isn't that big of a concern. It's more about the actual testosterone. IGF-1, so this is pretty relevant to longevity. Very high IGF-1 levels are associated with cancer. Very low IGF-1 levels are associated with increased risk of neurodegeneration and dementia later in life, because you need IGF-1, you need this growth for neurons, but very high IGF-1 levels can also be involved in cancerous growth. Both our IGF-1 levels are on the lower end, usually around 100. The lowest I've been has been like 94. Bryan's is also something like 90, 100, something like that. So we're equal in that scenario. Now, some people, okay, is it good or bad for longevity? So the sweet spot for longevity is something like 110 to 120 nanograms per milliliter of IGF-1. But both of ours is slightly lower. And, I'm okay with that. I think it's actually good because it reduces the risk of cancer. And I'm in no risk of frailty in that sense, because I have high bone density, high bone muscle mass, good nutrition status. I don't think it's a concern for Bryan either, because his bone density is high. He has, decent muscle mass, so he's not at risk of frailty directly. So I think personally, I consider an IGF-1 of 100 nanograms per milliliter to be pretty good and more optimal for longevity because of the reduced cancer risk. But if it were to be lower than that, let's say 50, then that could be too low. And how do you increase IGF-1? You just eat more calories, more protein, more carbohydrates. And the key part is also more frequently. What I've found is that how much protein or how much carbs I eat has no effect on my IGF-1 levels. The way I achieve low IGF-1 is through intermittent fasting. Eating less often tends to result in lower IGF-1, in my experience. And Bryan does also some aspects of time-restricted eating. Vitamin D, 77 nanograms per milliliter for Bryan. Mine is a 56. Now, 77 could be too high. He's taken vitamin D supplement probably. And, it could be too high. So very high vitamin D levels are associated with increased mortality as well. But it depends how you achieve it. If you were to achieve such high vitamin D levels through natural sunlight, then it probably isn't gonna be a concern. But in his case, he's achieving it with supplementation. He's not, sunbathing or something like that. So in that case, it might be too high. But yeah, depends on a lot of other biomarkers. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, both are optimal for us. So Bryan's is lower, but he's taking some thyroid medication, which improves his thyroid function. So if he were to not take the thyroid medication, his thyroid markers would be much lower and much worse. But yeah, because of the calorie restriction. Mine is slightly higher. It means that my body is signaling the production of thyroid hormones, but they're not very high. They're still in the normal range. Free T4, both in the same ballpark, 1.48, 1.32. So in the hormone section, the biggest takeaway would be that, the presence of nutrients, especially presence of carbohydrates and insulin, plays a big role in sex hormones. So carbohydrate restriction, calorie restriction, even protein restriction can result in low sex hormones. All right, now let's move on with some of the experimental tests. And these involve some of these biological age tests and those kind of things. Dunedin Pace, so this is the Rejuvenation Olympics test that measures your speed of aging, or as it's called, it's a speed of aging test, but I don't think it actually measures your biological age or your speed of aging. It's just a label that is attached to the test. In reality, this test measures just acute inflammation. If you look at, my own results, Bryan's results, if you look at some of the studies on these tests, then you can see that they fluctuate a ton. They can be higher in the morning, lower in the evening. They can fluctuate day by day. Immediately after exercise, they're worse. Before exercise, they're better. Whatever it is, they just fluctuate a lot. So you really can't make any conclusions about your biological aging with this test because of the fluctuation. And they're also unpredictable. You can follow the very healthy or very optimized lifestyle. You can sleep a lot, no stress, no exercise, whatever it is, and get a worse result just out of randomness. So I've tasted a few of these, maybe 4 times, and they give quite a lot of different fluctuations. Matt Kaberlein, who's a PhD in geroscience, longevity science, and he did tests, 2 of the tests at the same time with multiple different companies, all gave different results. So how is it possible if you test at the same time and you get different results? So it doesn't make sense. or it makes sense if the test is wrong, if the test isn't actually measuring what you think it's measuring. But regardless, Bryan's best result for this test, 0.54, is average 0.67. So the interesting thing here is that Bryan tests this test a lot, like several times a month. Here in the document he tests 25 times this test per year. So obviously he's going to get a lot of different results. And if you test long enough, you're going to get a result like 0.54. You're going to get a result of 0.45, 0.3, whatever it is. If you test long enough, you're going to get the result that you want. So, I've taken, 4 times in my life this test. Bryan tests it 25 times a year. And of course, he's going to get whatever test result that he wishes. Yeah, my best result was 0.62. And I just stopped doing the test because I think it's kind of useless and it doesn't really tell you what people think it does. Telomere length. So I haven't tested this in more accurate way. I haven't done a specific telomere test. I got a telomere test result from the Dunedin paste test. It was part of the component, but I don't think it was an actual most accurate telomere test. But that test result gave me 7.9. But I haven't done yet like a proper telomere test. Bryan's 11.4. Now here as well, you could argue that very long telomeres can be actually not good. So telomerase, this enzyme that grows telomeres, is also involved in cancer. So excessive telomere growth is a hallmark of cancer. Or you don't want to have super long telomeres. It's more about the speed of telomere attrition, how fast the telomeres shorten is what matters and what you want to pay attention to. Next, we have PhenoAge. So this is the biological age estimation based on 10 blood markers created by Dr. Morgan Levine. And it involves tests like creatinine, glucose, CRP, lymphocyte percentage, white blood cells, RDW, alkaline phosphatase, and MCV. So you put these things into like a calculator. You can find it online. Just Google PhenoAge calculator. You can add the test, and it estimates your biological age, phenotypic age, based on those blood markers. And you also need to put your chronological age, because the chronological age actually has a huge influence on the test result. Because if you're 60 years old, it's very unlikely you have a biological age of 15 as a phenotypic age. But if you're 35 or 30, like me, you can have a phenotypic age of 15, because the gap between 15 and 30 is much smaller than 65 and 15, if that makes sense. So yeah, because of that reason, Bryan's, as we said, he had very high creatinine, he had slightly high glucose, he had low white blood cells, low lymphocyte percentage. All those factors resulted in his PhenoAge of 8.81 years lower than his chronological age. So his phenotypic age is 39, something like that. Mine, 18.5 years lower, so it's 12. So there's a 18-year difference between my phenotypic age and my chronological age, and 8.8-year difference in Bryan's phenotypic age and his chronological age. Now, if you were to put the same numbers that I had, my creatinine, my glucose, my lymphocyte percentage, my CRP, and all those markers into Bryan's calculator, and you put his chronological age of 47, then his PhenoAge would be 20 years lower. He would be 27 phenotypically. So as you can see, the chronological age plays a huge role in influencing the PhenoAge. If you're someone who is 45, 55, and you have very good creatinine levels, very good glucose levels, the delta or the gap between your PhenoAge and your chronological age can be much higher. Now, it'd be very hard for me as a 30-year-old to have a PhenoAge that's 20 years lower than my chronological age. It would be extremely hard for me to achieve a PhenoAge of 10. Right now, based on this test result, the latest ones, it would be 12, which is possible, as I've just shown, but it would be much harder for me to have a PhenoAge of 10 with a gap of 20 years. But it is possible for Bryan, because if you were to put my results to his chronological age, my creatinine, my glucose, my CRP, my lymphocytes, etc., then he would get a PhenoAge of 20 years lower. And interestingly, there's this website, Longevity World Cup, and it just is a kind of similar leaderboard as the Rejuvenation Olympics, but it's more crowdsourced or more independent, and they use the PhenoAge-based calculations. And Bryan's result wouldn't put him in the top 60 people in the Longevity World Cup, meaning that there are at least 60 people who have enrolled in this competition who have better biomarkers than Bryan. So, Michael Lustgarten, who's a friend of the channel, he's been on a podcast, his result is 23.9 years lower. So he's, I think he's 55 chronologically. So his PhenoAge is 30, something like that. 32 is his PhenoAge. And that's a significantly better result than Bryan. But yeah, Bryan's PhenoAge score based on his latest result wouldn't put him in the top 60 of people in the Longevity World Cup, which just means that there's a ton of people out there who have much better biomarkers than Bryan. I have better biomarkers than Bryan. Michael Lustgarten has better biomarkers than Bryan. And 59 other people have better biomarkers based on the PhenoAge at least than Bryan. Now, they probably haven't measured as comprehensively as Bryan. Yeah, Bryan has measured, I don't know, few hundred markers. These individuals probably have measured maybe a few dozen at most. But the PhenoAge, which is a umbrella marker for overall, is obviously has its flaws. You can have high blood sugar on one day. You can have low lymphocyte, low white blood cell because of infection or something like that. So it obviously fluctuates as well, similar to the Dunedin pace test. But it's a bit more practical because it includes 10 other biomarkers. It includes creatinine, it includes CRP, ALP, RDW, all those things that you can know what to focus on. Whereas with the Dunedin pace test, you don't really know what you need to focus on if you get a result, because the test can obviously fluctuate quite a lot. All right, so I went through all these markers, over 65 of them. My general consensus or analysis of his markers is that he doesn't have bad markers. A few of them are worse than others, but he's not, based on the blood markers, in some sort of bad health. He has above average health compared to an average 45, 47-year-old, even an average 40-year-old, 35-year-old. He has better markers than those individuals, but they're not the best in the world. I've just factually shown you that I have significantly better markers, 44 versus 9. That's an overwhelming majority of markers I have better than him. And on top of that, there's 59, 60 people on the Longevity World Cup that beat him on the PhenoAge test. So there you have it. There's like dozens of people who have better biomarkers than Bryan. And the claim that he has the best biomarkers in the world is just, I guess it's just marketing. There's the saying that if you repeat a lie long enough, then it will become true. So I feel like that's the strategy here. You just repeat this long enough and eventually people will believe it. So, for a layman, Bryan's markers sound very impressive and scientific. For someone who understands blood markers and understands what's optimal, like me and many others like Michael Lustgarten, other PhDs, other doctors, then for them, they're not very impressive. They're better than average, but they're not insanely amazing. I reversed my age by 25 years, 10, 15 years. They're, better than average, but they're not insanely impressive. So there you have it. I just made this video because Bryan repeatedly claimed I have the best biomarkers in the world. I'm the healthiest person in the world. I just, someone had to put a stop to this and factually show that it's not the case. And like I said, there's dozens, hundreds of people probably out there that have better biomarkers than him as well. If you want to know the full details of what I do for my longevity and overall health, then I've got an evidence-based longevity routine video that you can watch next.